All right, this is Reed Sternberg, and I'm out here at EarthX 2019 talking with a lot of enthusiastic exhibitors, speakers, and sponsors. I've got all the above right here in Anna Sova. So Anna Sova, tell us a little bit first off about what you do and what you're doing here at EarthX today.
Well, I love EarthX. It's a fabulous event. It's obviously not just the largest in the world, but definitely the most interesting. And we have a booth here for AnnaSova.com. We have the world's finest quality certified organic linens.
Okay.
So everything is GOTS certified. And then we also give back to a lot of orgs with different donation through purchase programs for Sea Shepherd, BeyondPesticides.org, SaveOurMonarchs.org, Elephant Action League. So these are a lot of great orgs that I'm a personal supporter of, and we support them through different bedding collections. And then we also have a paint made out of up to 96% food-grade ingredients. So it is actually technically the healthiest paint you can buy, and we actually had to fight to win the trademark on that because we were challenged by the paint industry. So we had to hire 3 independent laboratories to actually prove that against 25 other paint brands.
And basically prove that it was unique and patentable?
And not only patentable, but trademark the healthiest paint you could buy.
Okay.
So the paint industry can be pretty mean when you start to say things like that.
Right,
so.
right. So Anna is also the author of a book, and is this a recent release?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so she is the author of Climate Change and Interior Design. So let's talk about the book for a minute and tell us about what this is covering.
Well, it's an interesting book in that it has a lot of sources.
Okay.
So if you're an interior designer or an architect, or if you love interior design, or if you'll excuse the term, if you love house porn, or you love to look at great photographs of houses and you're constantly analyzing what's eco-responsible and what's not, this book is a great guide for that. So it talks about things such as 14% of the greenhouse gases come from factory farming, so don't buy leather. Because a lot of people think, well, I can do a leather couch because the leather is used for beef, but in fact, 5 to 10% of the value of that cow is in the leather or the skin. So whenever you contribute to the economic sustainability of something that contributes to greenhouse gases, then you're part of the problem.
Right, so in other words, by creating demand for the skin, you're also validating or increasing the demand for the beef itself.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And when you don't buy the leather, then it increases the cost of the beef and makes it less likely to be economically viable.
Gotcha.
So we have 20 different varieties of vegan leather that I recommended here, including 3 different companies that make them out of mushrooms.
Interesting.
And companies like Gucci and Louis Vuitton and a lot of new designers are working a lot with alternative leathers.
I did not know that people were actually wearing fungus. That's pretty cool.
Yes, it's great. I love fungus myself.
Okay.
So, but also we have alternatives for almost everything. I talk a lot about bioplastics.
Okay.
I've been involved in either bio-based, biodegradable, or compostable plastics since the late 90s.
Okay.
As an eco-product designer and a manufacturing CEO of over 30 years, I have a lot of experience with the materials that are used in manufacturing.
Yeah.
So in particular, what I've found is always reuse materials first.
Sure.
So of course the reduce, reuse, recycle, upcycle.
Yeah.
And I know we're tired of the cliche, but it really is the most effective way.
It has to all stroll down from the most usable or the best reuse to the least accessible. So,
exactly.
yeah.
So with the book, we also have a lot of recommendations for how to recycle your existing furniture or your carpeting or your carpet pad or your mattresses.
Right.
In the United States, we throw away enough mattresses just in the USA to build an entire Mount Everest in 1 year. And those are not biodegradable mattresses.
Right.
So try to buy a biodegradable mattress, and then when you're done with it, find a place to recycle it.
Right, and that's something that's new, that people are getting options for recycling mattresses. You know, it's obvious for people that want to recycle aluminum, and a lot of times the city is doing it for them. Aluminum, glass, plastic are a little bit more obvious, but a lot of people are missing a couple of key components, electronics and also textiles. So talk to us a little bit about the textiles, because that's part of what we're talking here,
well,
right?
textiles are my obsession.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, I've done manufacturing in over 40 countries. And in particular, that's one of the things that about 30 years ago really started the change for me personally. I was importing containers of silk drapery panels, and we were doing a photo shoot in my home, and I had 22 panels in my bedroom, and when I went to sleep that night, I woke up hallucinating, and I thought, oh, college is coming back. So, sorry, but so anyway, but
can all relate,
I was
I'm
really sick. I was really sick, and
Yeah.
and the second day it happened again, and finally I called my factory in Bangalore, India, and I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "It's formaldehyde." So all of the silk panels were soaked in formaldehyde, and as it turns out, formaldehyde is still used in a lot of textiles that are imported into the U.S. today for home use.
Right.
But this was the late 90s, so at that time I went over to Bangalore and I said, "What did you use before you used formaldehyde?" And I found a little old man in the corner on a three-legged stool that had been with the family for 4 generations, and he finally said the Indian soap nut. And we've used the Indian soap nut in 5 continents for over 5,000 years. It's indigenous actually to Texas. And it's great. You can wash your baby in it. You can wash your hair in it. You can use it for textile sizing. So I'd like to know who the wise guy is who decided to use 55-gallon drums of formaldehyde instead.
How was that an improvement, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I've heard about soap nuts about 10 years ago, and I met a local advocate who was doing it as a laundry cleaning process. Yeah, right. So another thing that comes up when we talk about textiles as a recent issue is microplastics being used in that. So let's talk about that for a second. Do you have any feedback for?
I have some very strong opinions that a lot of people will disagree with. But I personally believe that we should not only boycott, but we should outlaw recycled plastics in clothing and home textiles. I think that if you are around manufacturing or industrial uses for plastics, then we can reuse plastics the same way we do steel, aluminum, and other heavy industrial materials. But whenever you buy a piece of clothing, and I know because I've got a huge collection of Lululemon and I love them, but at the end of the day, unless you're using a guppy bag, which only protects 80% of the microfibers from going down into either the landfill or your water, or even eventually out to the ocean, then all of these microfibers are coming out of these textiles. So when you buy a polyester bedspread, or when you buy a polyester throw or a microfiber throw, all of these plastics are winding up in 93% of the bottled water that you drink in the USA has microplastics in it. And then 39% of the deep ocean plastics are actually microfibers deep in the ocean. So those are strictly from textiles. So this is a huge issue, and I don't think we should try to reuse the ocean plastics for clothing or textiles or materials that will be used in the home that will eventually wind up being washed or in a landfill. I think they should be relegated to commercial and industrial use, where they'll be more heavily regulated.
So the soap nuts were a retro alternative to the formaldehyde. What's our alternative to the plastics? Do we have good solutions there that'll achieve the same goal?
Well, we do actually. And what's interesting about that is there's bio-based plastics or plant-based plastics, which I've been working with plant-based plastics since the late 90s. And I started in Germany. I actually started when I was making curtain rings out of wood. And our manufacturer closed, and so I bought 2 huge machines to make curtain rings. And I discovered that one 2-inch curtain ring uses a 4-inch by 3-inch block of wood, 4 by 4 by 3, and it wastes 60% of the wood. So I decided to do injection molded rings that had a wonderful wood grain on the outside. And what I discovered is that you could do a corn plastic, which was funny because it was U.S. corn being shipped to Germany, and then we were paying to ship containers of it back from Germany to the U.S. And then eventually around 98, we found someone here in the U.S. that would make it for us here. And then we moved into bamboo cellulose, and then we moved into, eventually the castor oil plant actually makes a great plastic. And then when you move away from how expensive plant-based plastics are, you then go into additives. So there's additives that you can add to almost every petrochemical-based plastic that will cause it to break down and actually biodegrade with time. And there's 2 ways to do that. One is you can redesign the plastic to where there's sugar or something that's more edible or something that's more tasty for bacteria and microbes. Or you can re-engineer the plastic to where it has a way that it'll break. And when it breaks, all it has to do is be exposed in a landfill to bacteria, and it's just made a slightly different way. It costs about 0.5% of the product, and there's a lot of companies that are either not aware of it yet or they don't want to spend the money, but I think we need to have a new solution where we have a new symbol just for biodegradable plastics, or more importantly, compostable plastics.
Okay.
Because a lot of biodegradable plastics will not biodegrade, for 50 or 100 or 200 years. But a compostable plastic has a limited time that it's required to compost. And then it becomes pure soil.
Well, so you're clearly an advocate. We've talked about that offline, and you're demonstrating that with what you have to say. But tell me a little bit about what the path is for that advocacy. How do we make the change that you're advocating for? How do we get the industry to change so that the plastics are not?
The first thing is to actually have the discussion.
Okay.
And a lot of places don't want to talk about how climate change or how the interior is being affected, or how interior design affects climate change, but it really does. In the United States, we consume almost 30% of the planet's goods, as you know, and we actually do spend a great deal of that on the interiors of our homes.
And that involves redesigning interiors and stuff coming out while stuff is going in, right?
Exactly. And and you're right, it's both sides of the chain.
Yeah.
So it's what you throw away when you have disposable furniture or disposable bedding, or you decide to do fast fashion for your home. You wind up throwing that away, and instead it needs to be recycled.
Yeah.
Or it needs to be given to a charity where they'll do something with it and turn it into something else, or at least turned into another object, by recycling with somebody who might use the textile in another way.
Or has anybody thought about an organization that specifically makes a switchboard to reuse? So if someone doesn't like the look they've had and they're moving on to a new look, maybe there's someone else that likes that look, and there could be a switchboard that helps share it and reuse it.
I think it's a great idea. I think eBay and Etsy do part of that too. But I love your idea. And there's also the Sustainable Furnishings Council, which is a great place to go for sustainable furnishings. It's really important to look for a lot of labels, and I put a lot of those logos in the book and talk about a lot of the companies that do have sustainable furnishings. So. If you want to use GOTS, Global Organic Textile Standards, everything they produce is certified organic from the seed, the soil up.
Okay.
And I'm a huge advocate of GOTS, and I was involved with SCAL for 17 years before that.
Okay.
But the other organizations like FSC, the Forestry Stewardship Council, is really incredible. And I've been involved with them since the late 90s. And they're not just about replanting a tree for every tree that's cut. They're also involved with indigenous peoples and trying to keep, Indian lands in Canada and the Northwest to where they're not over harvested, and people can't use those lands for the things that they've traditionally used them for.
Gotcha. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today,
Thank
Anna.
you for having me.
So this is Anna Sova. She is an exhibitor, a sponsor, and a speaker at EarthX, and an advocate as well. And
an activist.
And an activist, of course. Tell us how's the show been going for you so far?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah?
It's been wonderful. We've really enjoyed it. We've had some fabulous people here. We've had a lot of people come to our booth that really love our products that maybe had never heard of us before.
Yeah.
So it's great as a vendor, but it's also great to get the word out because a lot of people are interested in interiors and don't know what they're doing actually is causing harm.
Yeah.
So and we have free kitchen towels. So we kill 51,000 trees just for paper towels in the United States of America every year. So these are free with purchase or free to visit our booth. So
cool.
That's always
awesome.
fun.
I need one of those just for being under the lights in
You
this
do.
suit.
One for your head and one for everything else.
All right.
So one for everyone. Okay.
All right.
Thank
Great
you
score.
again.
Thanks
Thank
again,
you.
Anna. So
Okay,
this is Anna Sova. We're at EarthX 2019. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll be back again soon.